The emergency room doors swung open with a violent crash as Marcus Rivera burst through them, his 6-year-old daughter Sophia limp in his arms, her small body burning with fever so intense he could feel it radiating through her unicorn pajamas. His hands were trembling, his shirt soaked with sweat and panic, and his mind was screaming a single prayer over and over. Please, God, not her, not my little girl. The fluorescent lights above seemed too bright, too harsh, as nurses rushed toward him, their voices blending into an incomprehensible blur of medical jargon and urgent questions. He tried to answer, tried to explain that she'd been fine just hours ago, that she'd eaten dinner and laughed at his terrible jokes and begged for one more story before bed. But now she was burning up and barely conscious, and he didn't know what to do because he was just a single father who worked construction and knew how to build walls, but had no idea how to fix whatever was breaking inside his daughter's tiny body. Sir, we need information. Is she allergic to any medications? When did the fever start? Does she have any pre-existing conditions? The questions came rapid-fire from a nurse with kind eyes and a clipboard. But Marcus could barely focus because all he could see was Sophia's pale face, her lips slightly parted as she struggled to breathe, and he realized in that moment that he had never felt more helpless, more utterly alone, more terrified of losing the only person in the world who mattered to him. If you believe in the power of love, second chances, and the unexpected miracles that life sometimes brings when we need them most, please hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from right now? Your support means everything. Marcus had been a single father for 4 years, ever since his wife Vanessa had walked out on them without warning, leaving nothing but a note on the kitchen counter that said she couldn't do it anymore, couldn't handle the pressure of motherhood and marriage, couldn't pretend to be happy when she felt trapped. He'd read that note 1,000 times, searching for answers that weren't there, trying to understand how someone could leave their own child, but eventually he'd stopped looking for explanations and started focusing on what mattered, raising Sophia, making sure she felt loved and safe, and never doubted for a single second that she was wanted. He'd worked double shifts, learned to braid hair through YouTube tutorials, mastered the art of making princess-shaped pancakes, and become an expert at checking under beds for imaginary monsters. They'd built a life together, just the two of them. And it wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, filled with silly dance parties in the kitchen and bedtime stories told in ridiculous voices and weekend adventures to the park where he'd push her on the swings until his arms ached and she begged for just one more push. Daddy, please, just one more. But tonight, as he watched the medical team wheel Sophia away behind sterile white curtains, Marcus felt the foundation of that carefully constructed life crumbling beneath his feet. The emergency room doctor, a tired-looking man with gray streaks in his hair, had explained that Sophia had a severe infection, possibly pneumonia, and they were admitting her immediately, starting aggressive antibiotic treatment, monitoring her oxygen levels, running tests. The words had washed over Marcus like cold water, drowning him in medical terminology he didn't understand and fears he couldn't articulate. He'd been allowed to follow them to a pediatric ward, where Sophia was now sleeping fitfully in a hospital bed that seemed enormous compared to her small frame, her wrist tagged with a plastic bracelet, an IV line snaking into her arm, monitors beeping steadily in the background. Marcus sat in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed, his large, calloused hands wrapped around her small one, and tried not to fall apart. He'd already called his supervisor to explain he wouldn't be at work tomorrow, or probably the day after, and had been met with cold understanding that bordered on annoyance. He'd called his elderly mother who lived 3 states away and could barely walk herself, let alone make the trip to help. He'd scrolled through his phone contacts looking for someone, anyone, who could offer support, and had been confronted with the stark reality of his isolation. He had work buddies but not real friends, acquaintances, but not people he could call at midnight and ask for help. A life that had become so focused on Sophia that he'd somehow forgotten to maintain connections with the outside world. It was nearly 2 in the morning when the pediatric nurse came in to check Sophia's vitals. Her name tag read Dr. Amara Okafor, though she couldn't have been much older than 30, with warm brown skin, intelligent dark eyes, and an air of competence that seemed to fill the room. She moved with practiced efficiency, checking the monitors, adjusting the IV drip, placing a gentle hand on Sophia's forehead, and Marcus found himself watching her with something close to desperate hope, as if this woman might somehow hold the key to making his daughter well again. "She's responding to the antibiotics," Dr. Okafor said softly, her accent carrying traces of her Nigerian heritage. "Her temperature is starting to come down. That's a good sign." She turned to Marcus, and her expression softened when she saw the exhaustion and fear etched into his face. "Have you eaten anything? When's the last time you slept?" Marcus tried to remember but couldn't. Time had become meaningless the moment Sophia had started crying that her chest hurt. "I'm fine," he said automatically, the response of a man who'd learned to put everyone else's needs before his own. "You're not fine," Dr. Okafor said matter-of-factly, pulling up another chair and sitting down across from him. "You're running on adrenaline and panic, and neither of those is sustainable. Your daughter needs you to be strong, which means you need to take care of yourself too." She paused, studying him with those perceptive eyes. "Is there someone I can call? Family? A partner?" "There's no one," Marcus admitted, and hearing himself say it out loud made the loneliness that much more real. "It's just us. It's always been just us." Something shifted in Dr. Okafor's expression, a flicker of recognition or perhaps empathy, as if she understood what it meant to carry the weight of the world alone. "My shift ends in 20 minutes, she said quietly. "I was going to grab coffee from the cafeteria before heading home. Why don't you come with me, just for 15 minutes? She's stable and the nursing staff will page me immediately if anything changes." Marcus started to refuse. How could he leave Sophia's side even for a moment? But Dr. Okafor was already standing, already moving toward the door with the kind of quiet authority that made it clear this wasn't really a suggestion. And maybe it was the exhaustion, or the fear, or the bone-deep weariness of trying to be strong all the time. But Marcus found himself following her, casting one last look at his sleeping daughter before stepping into the fluorescent-lit hallway. The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty at this hour, populated only by a handful of bleary-eyed residents and one janitor methodically mopping the floor. Dr. Okafor ordered 2 coffees and a sandwich that she insisted Marcus eat, and they sat at a corner table surrounded by the institutional smell of disinfectant and overcooked food. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Marcus picked at the sandwich without really tasting it, and Dr. Okafor sipped her coffee, her eyes distant as if she were somewhere else entirely. "I came here from Lagos when I was 16, she said suddenly, breaking the silence. "My parents sent me to live with an uncle in New Jersey because they wanted me to have opportunities they couldn't provide in Nigeria. Better schools, better future, the American dream." She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I barely spoke English. I was terrified. I missed home so much it felt like a physical ache. But I studied, worked harder than everyone around me, got into medical school, specialized in pediatrics." She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "My parents died in a car accident 3 years ago, before I could bring them here like I'd always promised. My uncle passed last year. I have cousins scattered across the country, but we're not close. So I understand what it's like to be alone in this country, to feel like you're carrying everything by yourself." Marcus looked up at her, really looked at her, and saw not just a competent doctor, but a human being with her own scars and struggles. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked softly. "Because you looked like you needed to hear that you're not the only one," Amara said simply. "And because I've seen a lot of parents come through that emergency room, but I've never seen anyone hold their child with as much love as you did tonight. Sophia is lucky to have you." Something in Marcus's chest cracked open at those words, and before he could stop himself, the whole story came tumbling out. He told her about Vanessa leaving, about learning to be both mother and father, about the birthday parties he'd organized single-handedly, and the scraped knees he'd bandaged, and the nightmares he'd chased away at 3 in the morning. He told her about the constant fear that he wasn't enough, that he was somehow failing Sophia by not being able to give her everything she deserved, about the crushing weight of responsibility and the joy that came with every smile, every laugh, every time she threw her arms around his neck and whispered, "I love you, Daddy," in his ear. Amara listened without interrupting, without judging, and when he finally fell silent, she reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. "You're doing an incredible job," she said firmly. "Never doubt that." They talked until the cafeteria worker announced they were closing, and Marcus realized with surprise that nearly an hour had passed. But when they returned to Sophia's room, she was still sleeping peacefully, her breathing easier, her color better, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in hours: hope. Over the next 3 days, as Sophia slowly recovered, Amara became a constant presence in their lives. She wasn't Sophia's primary physician, but she stopped by the room during her shifts, bringing coloring books and stuffed animals and once, a collection of Nigerian folk tales that she read aloud in a voice that held the music of another continent. Sophia, emerging from the fog of illness, was instantly captivated by Dr. Amara, as she called her, and Marcus watched with wonder as his shy daughter opened up to this kind stranger, asking questions about Nigeria and medicine and whether Dr. Amara had ever met a real princess. And Marcus found himself opening up too, in ways he hadn't with anyone since Vanessa left. Amara was easy to talk to, warm and funny, and refreshingly direct. She told stories about disastrous first attempts at American cooking and cultural misunderstandings that had her patients' parents thinking she was terribly rude when she was just being Nigerian direct. She listened to Marcus talk about his work, about the satisfaction of building something with his hands, about his dreams of maybe one day starting his own contracting business. They discovered they both loved old movies, both had irrational fears of pigeons, both believed that breakfast was the most important meal and that coffee was more necessity than beverage. On the morning Sophia was discharged, healthy and energetic, and complaining that she was bored and wanted to go home and play with her toys, Amara stopped by one last time. She'd brought a small teddy bear dressed in scrubs for Sophia and a carefully wrapped package for Marcus. Inside was a book about single parenting, and on the first page she'd written, "For Marcus, you're already doing everything right. But sometimes we all need reminders. Amara." "Thank you," Marcus said, his throat tight with emotion. "For everything. You didn't have to." "I know," Amara interrupted gently, "but I wanted to." She hesitated, then added, "I put my personal number in the back of the book. If you ever need anything, or if Sophia wants to hear more Nigerian stories, or if you just want to talk." Marcus stared at the book in his hands, at the careful handwriting, at the kindness of this gesture from someone who barely knew him. "I'd like that," he managed to say. "I'd really like that." The friendship that grew between Marcus and Amara over the following months was unexpected and precious. It started with text messages, updates about Sophia's health, shared memes about parenting and medicine, photos of particularly terrible cafeteria food. It progressed to phone calls, long conversations late at night after Sophia was asleep, and Amara had finished her shift, talking about everything and nothing, finding comfort in each other's voices. And eventually, carefully, they began to meet in person. Coffee on Saturday mornings when Amara wasn't working. Lunch in the park with Sophia playing on the swings nearby. A movie one evening when Marcus's mother surprised them by coming to visit for a weekend and could watch Sophia. Marcus didn't mean to fall in love. He'd told himself after Vanessa that he was done with romance, that his focus was Sophia and only Sophia, that he couldn't risk bringing someone into their lives who might leave and break not just his heart, but his daughter's. But Amara slipped past his defenses without even trying. It was in the way she remembered that Sophia was nervous about her first day of first grade and showed up at their apartment that morning with a special brave girl bracelet. It was in how she patiently explained medical concepts when Marcus got worried about every little cough or fever, never making him feel stupid for his concerns. It was in the way she laughed, throwing her head back unself-consciously, and the way she argued passionately about ridiculous things like whether pineapple belonged on pizza, and the way she looked at Sophia with genuine affection, not obligation. It was in the way she looked at him, too, like he was someone worth knowing, like his rough hands and simple life and baggage were not things to overcome but simply parts of who he was, like maybe, just maybe, he deserved to be happy. The first time he kissed her was on a cool October evening, 6 months after that desperate night in the emergency room. They'd taken Sophia to a Halloween carnival, and his daughter had run herself ragged bobbing for apples and riding the tiny carousel and eating more candy corn than was probably advisable. She'd fallen asleep on Marcus's shoulder during the drive home, and Amara had helped carry her inside, tucking her into bed with practiced gentleness while Marcus watched from the doorway, his heart so full it hurt. They'd stood together in his small living room afterward, and Marcus had finally found the courage to say what had been building inside him for months. "I love you," he'd whispered. "I didn't mean to. I wasn't looking for this. But I love you, Amara. I love who you are and how you make Sophia laugh and how you make me feel like maybe I can do this. Like maybe we can be happy. Like maybe there's room in our lives for more than just survival." Amara had cupped his face in her hands, her eyes shining with tears and joy. "I love you too," she'd said. "I came to this country looking for a better life, and I found education and a career and independence. But I never found home. Not until I met you and Sophia. You gave me that. You gave me home." And then he'd kissed her, soft and gentle and full of promise, and felt something that had been broken inside him begin to heal. If this story has touched your heart, if you believe in the power of unexpected love and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us what you think, and share it with someone who needs to hear that beautiful things can emerge from our darkest moments. And before we finish, please comment, "Unexpected love," if you believe that sometimes the people who enter our lives in moments of crisis are the ones who end up changing everything. A year later, on a sunny afternoon in early autumn, Marcus stood in his small backyard that he'd transformed into something magical. White lights were strung between trees, flowers bloomed in carefully tended beds, and a small gathering of people, Amara's colleagues, Marcus's work friends who'd become real friends, Sophia's classmates and their parents, filled the space with laughter and celebration. Sophia, wearing a lavender dress she'd picked out herself, was running around with her friends, her face glowing with happiness. And beside Marcus stood Amara, radiant in a simple white dress, her hand in his as they prepared to make promises in front of everyone they loved. The ceremony was small and intimate, officiated by one of Amara's fellow doctors, and when it came time for their vows, Marcus felt his voice shake with emotion. "You came into our lives on the worst night I'd ever experienced," he said, his eyes locked on Amara's. "I was terrified and alone and convinced I was going to lose everything that mattered, but you showed up, and you didn't just help me through that one night. You stayed. You became part of our story. You taught me that it's okay to need people, that asking for help isn't weakness, that opening your heart again isn't foolish, it's brave." He glanced at Sophia, who was watching with wide, happy eyes. "We don't need anyone to complete us. Sophia and I were already whole, but you made our lives bigger, fuller, richer. You gave us family. You gave us love. And I promise to spend every day making sure you know how grateful I am that you walked into that emergency room, that you saw us, that you chose us." Amara's vows were just as moving, speaking of finding belonging in unexpected places, of learning that family isn't always about blood, but about choice and commitment and showing up every day even when it's hard. She knelt down and spoke directly to Sophia, promising to love her, protect her, and be there for every scraped knee and school play and milestone. And Sophia, who'd been working on keeping a secret for weeks, pulled out a small bouquet of flowers she'd made in art class and presented it to Amara with a carefully rehearsed speech. "Thank you for loving my daddy and me. I'm so happy you're going to be my mom, too." There wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. As the sun set and the celebration continued, Marcus found himself standing slightly apart from the crowd, watching Amara dance with Sophia to music playing from someone's phone, both of them laughing, both of them his family now. He thought about that desperate night in the emergency room, about how he'd felt so utterly alone, convinced that he had no one to rely on but himself. He thought about all the ways his life had changed since then, not because he'd gone looking for change, but because sometimes life surprises you when you least expect it. Sometimes the help you need for just one night turns into something permanent and beautiful and real. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "She's perfect for you both. I'm so happy you let yourself love again." And maybe that was the real lesson, Marcus thought. Not that he'd found someone to rescue him, because he'd never needed rescuing, but that he'd found someone who wanted to walk beside him, who'd chosen to be part of the messy, complicated, beautiful adventure of building a life together. That he'd learned to let his walls down, to trust again, to believe that happy endings weren't just fairy tales, but possibilities waiting to be embraced. Amara caught his eye across the backyard and smiled, that warm, genuine smile that still made his heart skip, and beckoned him to join them. Sophia reached out her arms, demanding Daddy come dance too, and Marcus walked toward them, toward his family, toward the future they were creating together one day at a time. He'd only needed help for one night. For his daughter, in a moment of crisis when the world seemed to be falling apart. He'd never expected to fall in love, never imagined that the kind-eyed doctor who'd insisted he'd take care of himself would become the person he wanted to take care of for the rest of his life. But love, real love, doesn't wait for perfect timing or logical reasons. It shows up in hospital hallways and cafeteria conversations and late-night phone calls. It grows in the spaces between words, in shared silences and understanding glances, and the simple act of showing up again and again, even when it's hard. As Marcus pulled Amara and Sophia into a tight embrace, both of them squealing with laughter, he sent up a silent thank you to whatever force had brought them together. For the crisis that had led to connection. For the doctor who'd seen beyond his fear to the person underneath. For the courage to open his heart again. And for the extraordinary gift of finding home in another person, of building family not just through blood, but through choice and love and the daily decision to keep choosing each other, no matter what. Their story had started with fear and ended with joy. But really, Marcus realized it hadn't ended at all. It was just beginning, and he couldn't wait to see what came next. Thank you for watching this story about unexpected love, second chances, and the beautiful surprises that life brings when we least expect them. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more touching stories that celebrate the resilience of the human heart and the power of love to transform our lives in the most unexpected ways.